Welcome to Six Goblin, where today we're diving into Rogue the Savage Land number 1. Rogue's lost her power. She's battling dinosaurs and teaming up with Magneto to survive a deadly tropical world buried in the Antarctic. This miniseries revisits an iconic 90s X-Men arc, and we can't wait to break it down, so let's go! The book kicks off with Rogue recounting how she ended up in her current predicament, with a brief retelling of the events of Uncanny X-Men 269. She dives into the Siege Perilous, an ancient magical crystal portal to the multiverse where those who pass through are judged by the highest cosmic powers. Rogue describes passing through the Siege Perilous as feeling like she was being torn apart and rebuilt again. Expecting judgment from some cosmic muckety-muck, she's instead spat out, back in her home in Australia, stripped of the powers she'd taken from Miss Marvel and her clothes. But before Rogue can even get dressed, Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel, is after her, and she's not happy to see her. Rogue describes Miss Marvel as a human F-15, so she runs as best she can without her powers when she happens across the mutant gateway, borrowing his powers to create a portal to escape. Only when she exits the other side of the portal, she's in some new place, explaining, "This time though, I didn't see a bunch of lives not lived or what have you. All I got was that tummy dropping feeling of being in one place one moment and somewhere completely different the next. That's how I ended up in the Savage Land." Rogue finds herself in a breathtaking primordial world, trapped in a terrarium the size of her home state, alone, powerless, and with nothing but her wits to survive. Rogue's a natural survivor. Having already armed herself with weapons to protect and hunt, she reflects on her childhood, fending for herself while her parents followed fish on tour. She's confident she's more than capable of handling whatever comes her way. Rogue admits spearing a fish is a bit tougher than grabbing fish sticks from 7-Eleven, but out here, she's picked up a few survival tricks. As she says, a few important lessons if you're ever planning on running around a Jurassic jungle in a one-piece and thigh-highs. Number 1, as she puts it, everything around is just as hungry and thirsty as you are, as we see Rogue get knocked over by a strange creature looking to take a drink. Number 2, as a Spinosaurus attacks the creature's neck, Rogue climbs up a tree to safety. Don't ever drink from nothing bigger than a puddle. When it comes to sleep, number 3 is don't sleep in the trees, and 4, don't sleep on the ground either. Then Rogue says, and number 5, and probably the most important, is we see the iconic Savage Land image of Rogue, her outfit in tatters, posed in front of a waterfall. She continues, "If you're bashful, you best get over that quick, cause the Savage Land will tear up your super suit faster than a couple rounds with the Juggernaut." She goes on to explain that even in her immodest state, she's still surviving, learning what's okay to eat and what's not. Took note of who of her animal neighbors could be lived with and which ones definitely couldn't. She had fresh air, plenty of room to stretch her legs, and even the buzzing of mosquitoes brought back nostalgic fuzzy feels from her childhood on the Mississippi River. The days, she says, were fun, but nights were hard. She says as long as she'd been there, she hadn't encountered any other people, not even a grunting monkey man with a club. Her powers had made it so she couldn't be touched like a normal person since she hit puberty. She was used to being lonely, but she'd never been so alone. But luckily for her, everyone she had ever touched and absorbed had some of their memories sucked up into her head. Whereas Rogue describes it, they hung about until they finally faded like the buzz of a cicada, and how most of her life she's considered this cross chatter a curse. On these nights, listening to their stories, she says, was the only blessing she had. The name of a good dog, the secret clubhouse password from the summer before 4th grade, electric touches they'd shared, first kisses and last. She said her mother had never been around past dark to sing to her, but she considers what happened out there, under a dome that kept the Antarctic sky from freezing the air, a lullaby. But then one night, Rogue heard a sound unlike anything she had heard before, a sound that turned the warm sweat on her chest to ice. And after all that time she'd spent wishing for any kind of person to come visit her, she regrets it as she's surrounded by armed amphibious people. Their veins burned and warning like the devil's blood ran through them. She goes on to question. She'd been through the Siege Perilous and thought she'd come out the same way she went in, but after seeing those things and hearing their tortured wails, Rogue thinks she might have been wrong. She figures just maybe after all she's done and after all the people she's hurt and all the lives she's stolen, maybe this was her perdition. Her perspective now shifted on the Savage Land. Rogue now walks in a daze, looking back over her shoulder at the faintest howl of wind. She figures she's set herself on finding somebody that could tell her she wasn't crazy. Maybe Chief Dareel. She'd have even settled for Sauron. on. All she had found, though, was devastation and death, which didn't help shake the notion that this was the bad place, which is why she figures she didn't notice Miss Marvel arrive as she descends from above, asking abruptly, "Remember me?" Miss Marvel, covered in a gray decaying substance, attacks Rogue, telling her their story is done. As she attacks Rogue, Rogue starts to absorb the substance as well. That's when suddenly, Miss Marvel is attacked from behind and Rogue is rescued by Magneto. Rogue is happy to be rescued and safe in the Citadel, but somewhat surprised that it's Magneto who has come to her rescue. Magneto basically tells her he picked a winner, that her and the machines engineered by the previous occupant of this Citadel did the rest, but at the expense of Rogue's abilities, to which Rogue responds, "I've been losing him in fits and starts anyway, with or without Sauron's contraptions. Besides, right now, I don't need him. I'm not alone anymore, Magneto." She then asks what it is that Magneto is doing here anyway, asking him if he still hasn't learned his lesson about devices that give or take powers. To which Magneto tells her the whole reason he's here is because he has learned a lesson. He goes on to say that the civilized world holds nothing for him. He no longer wishes to be a part of Charles Xavier's dream, nor does he desire to thwart it. Suddenly, they hear a noise in the Citadel. Rogue asks Magneto if he is house guest, to which Magneto responds, "No, and I was quite pleased with that." Then, as the pair head in the direction of the sound, Magneto speculates that given the conflict in the Savage Land, it's likely an errant warrior spotted this place and expected it may house a cache of weapons, or one of his failed mutates has come seeking revenge. Then, as he goes on to say, "Any who come here will discover, though I may no longer be interested in the war, a massive saber-toothed tiger steps forward, its green eyes gleaming with fierce intensity." Magneto, with hands upraised, summoning his might, then continues with, "I will never withdraw from the battle." Rogue quickly shouts out, "Magneto, wait!" As she steps between Magneto and the tiger, she shouts, "That ain't no mutate, that's Zabu." She goes on to tell Magneto that Zabu is Kazar's pet, or more like cat brother, right? She asks, petting Zabu, as Zabu now purrs like a kitten. Magneto responds, "Yes, Kazar, Lord of the Savage Land, we aren't friends." Then Rogue replies, "Yeah, well, being how you used to be, that ain't especially disqualifying." Zabu starts to growl at something and Rogue says, "I think he's trying to tell us something, you know? Like that old show Lassie, you ever see that?" After a pause, Magneto responds, "Yes, I have seen Lassie." Then as Zabu continues to growl, Rogue asks, "Okay, Zabu, we know this game. Go ahead. That jungle boy fall in a well or something." Zabu responds with a howl. Ready to attack if need be, Magneto shouts, "What did you do, beast?" Rogue cuts in. "He didn't do nothing, Magneto. That's it. The sound I heard out at the falls. Those weird things looking for me must have found Kazar. My perdition is spreading like a disease. Something real bad is happening to your man, bro. You lead away, kitty cat." Magneto calls Rogue weak. Rogue simply responds with, "Yeah, that's why you're gonna follow me, right?" A frustrated Magneto explains that he's removed himself from the affairs of man or mutant as loose metal, screws, and debris gather around him in the air. Then he asks Rogue what makes her think he cares about the squabbles of primitives and animals. With that, Rogue and Zabu head out on their adventure as Rogue shouts out triumphantly, "We're coming, Jungle Boy, yee-haw!" The screws and loose metal fall to the ground as Magneto pauses. He'd given himself a nosebleed. Then, in the last panel here, we see Magneto chasing after Rogue, saying, "Wait, I'm coming." Elsewhere, we find Kazar, Lord of the Savage Lands, as he is just waking up to the realization that he's been captured by the Deep Men. "It's the song they sing," he says. "That call, I know it, or rather, I know of it. It's the song of the Deep Men, but that can't be right. They only live in the trenches of the Garan Sea. Peaceful isolationists who would never, for instance, walk up on land and clobber the son of the tiger and stuff him in a cage." The Deep Men responds, "You were correct, Outlander. We would never leave our sea." He goes on, "But we would venture into the inhospitable surface lands to find a sacrificial offering of flesh that might make the gods take notice." Then we see this crazy scene of the Deep Men all around this dried ocean floor as they transport Kazar across the desert. It's explained that due to an environmental collapse, tribal war has broken out, and as resources dwindle, a mass extinction of the weak has begun. From a secret base, Zaladane's forces discuss the change in the Savage Lands environment. Brainchild Brainchild states that the damage that's been done is irreversible, to which Zaladane responds, science created this land, and scientists have abandoned it over and over again. Now, Brainchild can't get a word in edgewise here. Progress doesn't suit us. The world needs an unknowable, infinite being to guide it, an invisible, inexplicable force to bring fear back to men's hearts. Zaladane then declares, I've spent too long as priestess, little mutate. Now I will be God. Subscribe for more epic stories about your favorite heroes and hit that notification bell to stay updated on Six Goblin. And that is it. Thank you for watching part 1 to the end, and stay tuned for part 2.